see me murder his mom.
Well, this is Bass Webb, a 30-year-old man standing in a Kentucky courtroom, charged with attempted murder. The case against him was already shocking. Security footage from outside a Kentucky jail showed the moment Webb, a former inmate with a long violent history, got behind the wheel of a car and aimed it straight at two unsuspecting jail employees. One officer saw the danger coming and dove out of the way. The other wasn't so lucky. Webb's vehicle slammed into him, crushing him against a wall. Investigators would later testify that there was no accident here. This was deliberate, a calculated attempt to kill. Webb was arrested and soon after brought before the court. But before the trial could even begin, Judge Vanessa Dixon made an announcement that stunned the room. She was stepping down as she believed her ties to the victims made it impossible to preside over the proceedings.
There's no way I'm going to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I'll have to see you for one further second.
But just as Judge Dixon prepared to recuse herself, Webb spat directly into the judge's face. The entire courtroom froze. Judge Dixon had a single stunned word to the bailiffs. Webb was immediately dragged out, but that would not be the last time he left his mark inside a courtroom or on the justice system. While awaiting trial, Webb instigated one of the most violent riots ever seen inside the Fayette County Detention Center. That alone earned him 15 years in prison. For the attempted murder of the jail employees, he got another 37 years stacked on top. But Bass Webb's story didn't stop there. While serving his sentence, he was charged again, this time for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Bria Rowitz. That conviction tacked on another 50 years, and 5 years later, Webb returned to court for yet another murder, this time of his second ex, Sabrina Vaughn. When he appeared in front of the judge, he looked less like a defendant and more like a villain torn from the pages of a horror story. His head was shaved bald, his skin inked with tattoos, including a hit list. On it were the names of judges, prosecutors, corrections officers, even members of the media, and 3 names on the list were already crossed out. The jury didn't hesitate. They found him guilty of intentional murder, and Webb was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. Bass Webb spat on a judge, rioted in jail, and even returned to court with a hit list tattooed across his body. But Ronnie O'Neal didn't need tattoos or riots to terrify a courtroom. He turned the trial itself into chaos by defending himself, shouting over the courtroom, and cross-examining the son he tried to kill.
The evidence is going to show my son did not see me murder his mom.
This is Ronnie O'Neal III, and he is in court, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder of his son, and arson in Riverview, Florida. On March 18, 2018, authorities reported that O'Neal killed his girlfriend Kenyatta Barron, murdered their 9-year-old daughter Ronivia, and attempted to murder his then 8-year-old son Ronnie IV before setting their family home on fire. The call that alerted police officers to the scene came from Barron herself. On the phone, she pleaded for help from the dispatcher as O'Neal attacked her. On the call, the dispatcher could hear her terrified pleas. But that was not all. Before help could come, Barron was attacked and murdered, and after killing his girlfriend, O'Neal turned on his own daughter, hacking her to death with a hatchet and stabbing his son multiple times before setting the house on fire with their bodies still inside. Miraculously, the little boy survived and was rescued by the police officers who arrived at the scene. In court, the trial, which was already popularized from the details of the horrific crimes, became even more infamous when O'Neal made the decision to represent himself, and what would unfold in that courtroom was unlike anything most people had ever seen.
The evidence is going to show.
This is the first impression jurors received of Ronnie O'Neal.
Died, but if anyone thought that was the worst of it, O'Neal had more coming. He immediately followed up with accusations against law enforcement.
That law enforcement tampered with evidence.
But the prosecution was not to be swayed. They had the case centered on the harrowing 911 call from Kenyatta Barron, which was played in court with O'Neal present, revealing the horror in real time.
The evidence will show that that was just the beginning. That's just the beginning of what happened this evening.
After attacking Kenyatta, O'Neal turned on his children. He beat and stabbed his daughter to death before attempting to murder his son. The prosecution also detailed how O'Neal set the house on fire in an attempt to cover his crimes, trapping his injured son inside. The boy managed to escape, severely burned and wounded, but alive.
And it's just the beginning of what became an odyssey for this little boy. An odyssey of violence, an odyssey of brutality.
He trial moved forward with the prosecution presenting graphic evidence, including the broken shotgun used in the attack. The jury was shown crime scene photos of the house, charred from the fire O'Neal set in an attempt to destroy evidence. They also told the court that when police arrived at the scene, the surviving son told the police officers exactly what had happened.
The little boy, however, survived the attack, barely.
But the words that came out of this little boy's mouth were not a cry for help. They were not a help me or a painful cry. They will tell you the first words that came out of this little brave boy's mouth. My daddy killed my mommy.
And to back it all up, they called that one witness to the attack, whose testimony was all the prosecution needed to dismantle O'Neal's case.
Ronnie O'Neal has indicated that he plans to argue that he acted in self-defense. Meanwhile, his son, Ronnie IV, is expected to testify in this case. Right now, he's 11 years old at this point. This happened 3 years ago, and he is going to testify in the coming days.
But O'Neal was not done yet. In a twist that no one saw coming, he decided to cross-examine the son himself.
Did I hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
You stabbed me.
And through it all, he never expressed remorse for his actions. In fact, he outright declared to the court,
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Ultimately, the jury deliberated and found him guilty on all charges.
But I'm going to look you in the eye and tell you, this is the worst case ever in my life, and I have seen some horrors, but this is it. And I'm going to mete out the punishment that I think this case deserves.
Before the sentencing, the judge addressed the court.
Ronivia's bedroom, before you set it on fire, you could tell she tried so hard to make her feel like a princess. Kenyatta did everything she could. And I noticed too in the kitchen, on the refrigerator, she put up magnets that said faith, love, family, hope. And then you know what else happened to that refrigerator during that night? It got splattered with blood all over it due to what happened.
Finally, Judge Sisko delivered her sentence. Multiple consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus additional years for arson and aggravated child abuse.
I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison with a minimum mandatory of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Ronnie O'Neal will never see the outsides of a prison again. Ronnie O'Neal turned the entire courtroom into a circus, going ahead to be his attorney in his own murder trial. But how does that compare to a defendant whose raw and violent outburst was aimed directly at his own lawyer W, if a very choice of weapon? This is Ricky Hand, and he is charged with multiple counts of armed robbery in Dayton, Ohio. Ricky was no stranger to the system. He had a rap sheet stretching back years, but one bad decision finally caught up with him. In February 2016, Hand walked into John's drive-thru on West Main Street, attempting to commit robbery, but this time the store owner saw him on the surveillance camera and had his gun well ready and waiting. When Hand made it through the door, the owner attacked, firing off 3 shots while Hand retreated, wounded by the gun. The store owner then contacted the authorities about the incident, while Alice moved quickly, and with the help of the security footage was able to arrest him quickly.
911 emergency.
Yeah, this is John's drive-thru, West Main Street. A guy just tried to rob me and I shot him. He ran out the back door.
Okay, is he injured?
I think I hit him.
Responding officers quickly traced Hand to a nearby hospital where he was arrested. While in custody at the police station, he made a full confession.
I did try to rob John's drive-thru. We got shot 3 times.
But it was not just one robbery incident. By the time Hand was done with his confession, police knew that there were other robberies he had committed, including a recent break-in at a local store, all while he was on parole. In court, he pleaded guilty to all charges against him, but after considering his long rap sheet, the judge decided to give him a harsher sentence, and this was where it all turned crazy.
Did you just give me 40 years, sir?
But Hand did not turn on the judge. He turned on the one person who had his best interest in mind.
Sir, what's this?
He hurls a cup of his own bodily fluids at his own lawyer, screaming obscenities while courtroom security springs into action, tackling him to the ground. Even while being physically restrained by officers, Hand still went off in a meltdown.
40 years, you got me. You can't play Jesus and God? What's wrong with you? That, man! 40 years of death sentence, man! I scared the people all that yeah, man!
While he lawyer was majorly unharmed by this encounter, thanks to his actions, the judge added new charges of harassment, obstruction, and assault on top of Hand's very, very long list. Ricky Hand shocked the room by attacking the very person defending him, but this defendant took things even further, lunging at her attorney in a frenzy so intense, deputies had to drag her down mid-attack. This is Taylor Schabusiness, who's charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault in Green Bay, Wisconsin. February 23rd, 2022, started as a regular day for Tara, mother of 24-year-old Shad Therian. But what she found in the basement that morning would shake Green Bay and the entire nation to its core. Inside a 5-gallon bucket down in the basement and covered by a blanket was her son's head. The scene quickly escalated to one of the most gruesome crime investigations in local history.
Pretty positive my son's head is in a bucket, right now bucket in my basement.
What makes you think that?
Because I looked in the bucket.
What did you see?
Exactly what I told you.
When police arrived at the rundown duplex, they found further horror throughout the house, evidence of dismemberment, and a crime scene that told a story of unspeakable violence. And surely, as Tara had described, Shad's head was in a bucket, completely severed and clearly dead. The discovery led them directly to Taylor Schabusiness, Shad's girlfriend, who was quickly located and arrested. In custody, Schabusiness admitted to police that after using meth with Shad, she strangled him during sex, then spent hours dismembering his body with kitchen knives, scattering remains throughout the house and the family van.
And like we were smoking, right? And then I'm terrible at explaining things, so let's see here. And then here comes the chain, right? And then he put it around his neck. I drained his head. Well, like after I covered his blood, I put it in the bucket, but then there's still blood in this bucket, so it's coming out of the head. Should have took the brains on, but I didn't do that. And then
But even that horrifying confession was no match for what came after, when the case went to court. In court, the responding officers at the scene that day testified to what had happened that day.
I had Officer Plunky come downstairs and just verify we had in fact found a human head in the bucket. And then we started to notify a supervisor and then ask for additional units.
And the defense attempted an insanity plea, but evidence of planning in Schabusiness's own statements undermined psychiatric arguments. The trial's conclusion was inevitable. The jury found Taylor Schabusiness guilty on all counts, but whatever leniency the court intended to give her disappeared when she did something no one saw coming.
Stop it. Stop it.
The lawyer, who was rather surprised by the unexpected attack, barely got out of the way before Taylor was subdued by the deputy.
Rachel, call.
The next time Taylor appeared in court for her sentencing, she was shackled and her mouth guarded with a spit hood. In July 2023, she was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault.
The first verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information, dated this date, July 26th, 2023.
Taylor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of her boyfriend.
First-degree intentional homicide as a repeater. It's a Class A felony. Going to impose life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I believe that's appropriate in light of the...
But the streak of violence was far from being over. While in prison, Taylor attacked a prison nurse with a metal tray and was charged with assault. And once again, she had a vendetta against the lawyer who was representing her again.
Frustration that may be a moot point.
All right. It is one witness, Your Honor.
But this time, the court deputies were almost anticipating her attack, and they moved in to restrain her.
We're off the record.
Taylor Schabusiness had a history of attacking her lawyers, the very people who had to defend her. But Deobra Redden didn't go after his attorney. He went after the judge herself, leaping straight over the bench in a full-blown assault. This is Deobra Redden, and he is in court facing charges of attempted battery in Las Vegas, Nevada. Redden had already been found guilty of the charges, and it is now time for sentencing.
Mr. Redden, is there anything you want to say on your own behalf before I pronounce sentence?
So basically, I would like to tell the courts, everyone here.
But this time, Redden was asking for leniency. He argued he shouldn't face prison time, but rather probation, as he is a changed person. His words were desperate, but the judge's response was measured. She'd seen too much from his record to be swayed by his pleas.
Like, based on my criminal history, like, I feel that, like, I shouldn't be, like, sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history?
Judge Holthus pressed him about his criminal history. Redden hesitated, struggling to defend his past, but the judge was firm, reminding him of the consequences of his actions.
I appreciate that, but I think it's time that you get a taste of something else, because I just can't with that history. In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada,
Then, in a split second, everything changed. Court staff rushed to intervene and stop the attack on the judge. The judge, who was obviously shaken up by the attack, was helped to her feet while the rest of the courtroom was left in shock. The impact of the assault clear on everyone present. The following week, Redden returned to court for sentencing on the original charges. This time, security was overwhelming.
Mr. Almaci's here now.
Good morning.
Judge Holthus made it clear her sentencing decision was made before the attack and would not be influenced by Redden's actions.
In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court does now sentence you in addition to the $25 administrative assessment fee, $150 DNA fee, the $3 DNA administrative assessment fee, and $250 indigent defense fee, 19 to 48 months in the Nevada Department of Corrections. How much better for time served does he have?
Deobra Redden's attack left a courtroom in chaos when he went after the very person who was to decide his fate. But in Ohio, the chaos didn't come from the defendant. It came from a grieving father, pushed past the breaking point by the killer's cold, twisted smile. This is Michael Madison, and he is charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder, kidnapping, and rape in East Cleveland, Ohio. On July 19, 2013, 3 women, Angela Deskins, Shatisha Sheely, and Sherelda Terry were found wrapped in plastic and hidden near Madison's home. The horror starts when police discover the first body in a garage near Madison's apartment. That gruesome find leads them to search nearby abandoned houses and vacant lots. As investigators fan out, the true scope of Madison's crimes becomes clear. Each body is meticulously concealed, wrapped in plastic and hidden away, evidence of calculated brutality. The neighborhood is thrown into chaos. Residents express fear and anger as police continue to find more evidence.
Like this is very upsetting, not only for me, but for my children and grandchildren.
After a Friday standoff, police arrested this man.
As the investigation deepens, authorities realize Madison is not just a killer. He's a serial predator who preyed on women.
So it's kind of scary out here. I'm about ready to leave. Matter of fact, I am moving.
Madison's arrest doesn't come easily. He's a convicted sex offender who once idolized another Cleveland serial killer, Anthony Sowell.
In 2011, Anthony Sowell was convicted in the killings of 11 women. Their remains found inside of his home.
In court, prosecution painted a clear picture of what Madison had done for the jury.
Same way, at the same place, and in a short time frame. Then he disposed of their bodies. To avoid detection from his crimes, he tied 2 of the victims up with duct tape, placing their legs on each side of their head and bending the body in half.
There was not much to deliberate on. The state had done their work well, and the jury came back with a verdict of guilty on all counts. Because during the victim impact statement, one of the fathers of the victims, Terry, stood to deliver a victim impact statement, struggling with grief and fury as he addressed the man who took his daughter's life.
In our hearts, forgive this clown who's touched our families, taken my child.
He then turned around to look Madison in the eye, and Madison, who was nearly off camera, smiled at him. At that moment, Terry snapped and lunged at Madison. The deputies immediately restrained him from attacking the defendant, and he was escorted from the courtroom. The proceedings continued with the judge addressing the court on the extent of Madison's crimes.
I am struck by the sheer inhumanity of what one human being can do to not one, but 3 human beings.
Madison was sentenced to death for his crimes.
Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison, on counts 1, 4, and 7.
Michael Madison provoked a father into lunging at him, driven by unbearable grief. But here is a defendant who pushed the judge so far that the judge himself ripped off his robe and jumped into the fight. This is Jacob Larson, sitting before a courtroom in Jackson County, Michigan, on a protection hearing. Larson had been accused of stalking a woman. He had shown up uninvited to her workplace, dropped off flowers, and even posted a video online falsely claiming they were in a romantic relationship. But the truth was that she had never been with him. On the surface, this was supposed to be a routine hearing over a protection order, but what began as a standard proceeding would spiral into one of the most shocking, unforgettable clashes between a defendant and a judge in recent history. The most disturbing part was that this wasn't Jacob Larson's first time standing before the same court. He had been here before and had already been warned to stay away from the woman, but Larson had simply ignored the court's warning.
I know, but it's like this fatal attraction kind of stuff that I warned you about last time. I told you to just leave her alone. She was a classmate of yours. She apparently has no interest in seeing
I want her to tell me to leave her alone.
Inside the courtroom, presiding Judge John McBain had seen enough of Larson's antics to know what kind of hearing this was going to be. The judge's tone grew sharper as Larson grew louder. Instead of defending himself, Larson became disruptive, interrupting, dismissing the charges, and at one point going as far as to accuse the judge himself of being biased and unfair.
You know what? I told you to leave her alone. And apparently that didn't get through loud and clear. So today, you're going to jail for 3 days. And the next time you violate it, you're going to jail for...
You and her are...
You know what? You got a bad attitude.
That was the tipping point. Judge McBain's patience, which was already worn thin, snapped. At first, the punishment the judge meted out was light, 3 days in jail. But Larson couldn't stop himself. And with every objection, every insult, every arrogant smirk, Larson's jail time stretched longer.
You and her are buddy-buddy, y'all get along, y'all...
45 days county jail. 93 days in the county jail. You want to go for a year? Try it right now. One more word out of you, it'll be a year of county. You're going to jail for a year in the county. 365 days county jail. Can't do that.
Then the courtroom erupted. Judge McBain ordered Larson to be cuffed and removed, but Larson wasn't going quietly. As deputies approached, Larson resisted, thrashing, shouting, kicking back at the officers who tried to take him into custody. The scene escalated from tense to violent in seconds.
Put your hands behind your neck. Tase his ass right now.
And that's when something almost unheard of happened. Judge McBain did the unthinkable. He ripped off his black judicial robe and stepped down from the bench. Then he stormed toward the struggle and joined the deputies in physically restraining Larson.
All right. We'll make it 93. You can think about it. All right. Poor people. You know her. What so I know her? That's not fair.
Finally, Larson was subdued. He was sentenced to 3 months behind bars. Jacob Larson forced a judge into a physical brawl inside his own courtroom. But Judge Murphy in Florida didn't need to be provoked. He stepped down from the bench willingly to throw punches at a defense attorney. This is a circuit court courtroom in Brevard County, Florida. Presiding over the docket that morning is Judge John Murphy. Across from him stands public defender Andrew Weinstock, representing a client facing charges of assault and resisting arrest. At first glance, it looks like any other day inside the Moore Justice Center. But what was about to unfold would leave behind one of the most shocking moments in a courtroom. Judge Murphy's calendar was backed up, and he wanted the defendant to waive his right to a speedy trial so the case could be pushed further down the line.
Public defender, what do you want to do?
But they filed.
They have.
I'm not waiving.
All right, what do you want to do?
But Andrew Weinstock didn't budge. He refused to waive the rights of his client, protecting his client's rights, no matter how inconvenient it was for the court.
I'm not waiving. If you want to set it for trial, set it for trial.
But Judge Murphy didn't like being challenged.
If I had a rock, I would throw it at you right now. Stop pissing me off. Just sit down.
The entire room freezes in shock, but still, Weinstock held his ground.
I'll take care of it. I don't need your help.
No, you know what? I'm the public defender. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to stand and represent my clients.
And then, Judge Murphy said the unthinkable, words no one ever expects to hear from the bench.
If you want to fight, let's go out back, and I'll just beat you.
He essentially invited the defense attorney to step outside and settle their differences like a street fight. And that's exactly what happened. The judge left the bench. Weinstock followed him through a side door, off camera, out of view of the stunned courtroom. Seconds later, the sound of fists and scuffling echoed down the hallway. Moments later, Judge Murphy stepped back into the courtroom.
Thank you.
I will catch my breath eventually. Man, I'm an old man.
And then, as if nothing had happened, Judge Murphy went straight back to work. He resumed calling cases, this time without a defense attorney present to represent the defendants.
Your choices, considering there's probably going to be a changeover in personnel, are setting it for trial June 9th, or if you were wanting to waive speedy, we would set it for July 15th.
I would like to get it done as fast as possible.
That doesn't help me.
But the fallout was immediate. The bizarre outburst sparked an investigation by the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission. What they uncovered was damning. A judge who had threatened violence against an attorney engaged in a physical fight inside the courthouse and then continued proceedings without legal counsel for defendants. The case reached the Florida Supreme Court, and their ruling was unanimous. Judge John Murphy was permanently removed from the bench. His career on the judiciary finished in disgrace. As for Andrew Weinstock, the public defender who stood his ground that morning, he too would eventually step away, resigning from his position not long after the incident. Judge Murphy abandoned his authority to settle a dispute with his fists. But how does that compare to a defendant who made a rude gesture to the grieving family of his victims and barely made it out alive? This is Victor Rivas, just 17 years old, standing in a courtroom in San Antonio, Texas. His charge, first-degree murder. According to authorities, the story begins in May 2022, when police were called to a home in Bexar County. What they found was brutal. Lying near his front door was 15-year-old Ethan Soto, shot multiple times, left bleeding out just steps away from safety. Investigators quickly determined this wasn't random. The killing was targeted. Evidence pointed to drug-related grudges among local teens, feuds that escalated from whispers in the streets to cold-blooded execution, and all roads led to one name: Victor Rivas. He was arrested and placed in custody, charged with murder. When Rivas appeared for a pre-trial hearing, the atmosphere inside the courtroom was already heavy. In the gallery sat Ethan's family, staring down the teenager accused of stealing their son's life. Tension simmered like a fuse waiting to blow. And then, it did. In the middle of proceedings, Rivas made a gesture. Some witnesses swore it looked like a gang sign. Others said it was more of a casual, dismissive wave directed at the grieving family. But however it was meant, the impact was instant. The gallery erupted.
First at 5, family members of a murdered teenager accused of attacking the man on trial for it right in the middle of a Bexar County courtroom.
Ethan's loved ones surged forward, shouting, lunging at the teen defendant as chaos engulfed the courtroom. Deputies and court officers raced to intervene, but the eruption spread like wildfire. By the time officers regained control, Rivas had been pulled into the melee. He suffered visible injuries and ultimately had to be dragged out of the courtroom. Not as a show of punishment, but for his own protection. Fast forward to April 2025. The trial is over, the chaos subdued, but the outcome was decisive. Victor Rivas was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Ethan Soto, with an additional 10 years for evading arrest in a vehicle. Victor Rivas triggered an eruption in the gallery with a rude gesture, but here is a defendant who is full of remorse after realizing that the judge in front of him was someone from his past.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry.
This is Arthur Booth, and he is in court charged with burglary in Miami-Dade, Florida.
Hi, Mr. Booth. How are you?
How you doing, ma'am? Okay, ma'am.
Back in 2015, Arthur Booth faced burglary charges in Miami-Dade criminal court. Booth, once a promising kid, found himself trapped by addiction and petty crime. That day, he stood before Judge Mindy Glazer for a bond hearing, where a stark recognition would unfold. The core of the case: Booth was charged with breaking and entering, a crime that landed him behind bars for 10 months before his release in 2016.
You have actually 3 arrest affidavits: reckless driving, damage to property, leaving the scene of a crash with serious injury.
With no serious injury.
I'm sorry, no serious injury.
Okay.
But as the court proceedings continued, the judge realized who she was facing in the defendant's chair, and she asks Booth a question.
Okay, Mr. Booth, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go to Nautilus for middle school?
Booth's reaction was immediate.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry to see you there. I always...
Judge Glazer recalled the boy she once knew, a kid with bright potential, long lost to the struggles of adulthood.
My goodness.
I'm sorry to see you there. I always wondered what happened to you, sir.
Oh my goodness.
This is the nicest kid in middle school.
Oh my goodness.
He was the best kid in middle school.
She encouraged him to turn his life around, reminding him of his worth beyond the charges.
Good luck to you, sir. I hope you're able to come out of this okay and just lead a lawful life.
Booth served his time and was released, with the judge even meeting him upon release to offer support. But time would tell that the past wasn't so easily left behind. 8 years later, Booth returned to court, this time facing a string of new charges, robberies and break-ins that painted a troubling picture of relapse. This time, Judge Glazer recused herself from the case to keep things fair, as their shared history would make impartiality rather difficult.
I can't hear your case, so I'm going to get another judge to hear it, okay? So if you have a seat, somebody else will be here.
Arthur Booth's moment in the court was raw and emotional, but while Booth broke down in tears, this defendant did something far more shocking. She pulled out a gun and delivered her own verdict. This is Marianne Bachmeier, the German mother who stunned the world when she pulled out a gun and fatally shot her daughter's killer right inside a courtroom. It all began in 1980 when her 7-year-old daughter, Anna, was kidnapped by 35-year-old Klaus Grabowski. Klaus, though, was no stranger to the justice system. In fact, he already had multiple convictions for crimes against children and had even undergone chemical castration. But through legal loopholes and psychological evaluations, he somehow found his way back into society. On May 5th, after a small disagreement at home, Anna skipped school. That decision would be her last. Hours later, her body was discovered stuffed inside a cardboard box, dumped near a canal. Grabowski admitted to the killing, telling investigators that he feared Anna would report him, which could send him back to prison for life. His excuse horrified the public, but what made things even worse was what he would later say in court. During the trial, Marianne sat in the gallery, forced to listen as Grabowski described her daughter in the most degrading way possible. He told the court that Anna had seduced him. And with every court session, Marianne's grief continued to envelop into rage, until one morning, it all erupted. On March 6, 1981, Marianne Bachmeier walked into the courtroom. Hidden under her long coat was a small .22 caliber Beretta. She took her seat, waited for the proceedings to begin, and when Grabowski appeared before the court, she made her move. In a flash, she stood up, drew the pistol, and fired. 7 shots rang out in the packed courtroom. 6 of them hit their target. The deputies rushed to restrain her, but it was already too late. Klaus Grabowski collapsed to the floor and died instantly, right there in front of the judge, jury, and stunned courtroom spectators.
As if she would fall on the ground if the men didn't hold her.
With this incident, the trial ended not with a verdict, but with an execution carried out by a grieving mother. Marianne was immediately arrested and charged with manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. At trial, her defense argued that she had acted out of deep emotional distress, not premeditation. The court seemed to agree. Though she faced up to 6 years, she served just 3 before quietly moving away to Nigeria, later returning to Germany, where she lived a relatively quiet life until her death in 1996.